My wife left me when I was taking care of my dying father, which was an incredibly difficult time in my life. I have been married for 8 years and have 2 children. Being the only son, I felt a strong responsibility towards my ailing father, who has been suffering from kidney problems for many years. In the last couple of years, his condition has worsened significantly, requiring him to go for dialysis twice a week. At first, my dad could manage on his own, but over the last year, he has become weaker and increasingly needed my support. I made a routine of taking him for dialysis appointments, wanting to be there for him during such a difficult time. His appointments are on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Saturday is my day off, which makes it easier for me, while on Wednesdays, I arranged with my boss to leave work early to take him. I have worked at the same company for 10 years, and my boss knows I am dedicated and hardworking, so it wasn't an issue for him to give me this flexibility. However, my wife, who is 34 years old, had a different reaction. When she learned about my commitment to taking my dad for dialysis regularly, she became upset. Although she had never openly expressed her displeasure when I occasionally helped my dad in the past, once I took on this regular responsibility, she couldn't hold back her feelings. She told me that spending time with my father was pointless because he would never be impressed by what I did. To give you some background, my dad used to own a merchandising business and had built up a decent amount of wealth. He always wanted me to take over the family business, but I had other interests. I was passionate about technology and wanted to pursue a career in coding and software development. When I finished high school, Dad encouraged me to take business or management courses, but I chose to study software instead. Initially, he accepted my decision as long as I agreed to join his business after graduating. However, after I completed my degree, I decided to work for a well-known tech company, which made him unhappy. He repeatedly suggested that I join him in his business, but I continued to decline. The situation grew tense after I got married. Dad asked me one last time to come into the family business, and when I firmly said no, he became furious. He threatened to leave all his wealth to charity if I refused to join him. Despite the pressure, I stood my ground, confident in my ability to build a life for myself. I had already achieved a lot, owning my own car and a house by the age of 29, and I believed I could continue to succeed without his financial support. Our relationship became strained after that, especially after my mother passed away from a heart attack 5 years ago. Her death hit Dad hard. I had moved out at 17 for college and had been living independently, so losing my mom left him feeling very lonely. At that point, I made an effort to reconnect with him. I started visiting more frequently and brought my kids along to spend time with their grandfather. Eventually, Dad decided to step back from his company, putting it under a trust to manage. My wife, Aile, was never particularly close to my parents, and she often avoided visiting them, especially when my mother was alive. Aile thought my mom was too involved in our lives, which caused tension between them. After my father announced that he wanted to remove me from his will, Aile began to criticize my parents openly, calling them mean and unfair. I tried to keep her out of my relationship with them, but she insisted her opinions mattered, claiming these issues would affect our future and our children. Despite my reassurances that our family's future was secure regardless of my father's wealth, Aile refused to see it that way. She believed that Dad's decision to cut me out of his will would have serious implications for us. Thus, the situation escalated. Aile became more vocal about her frustrations, creating conflict at home during an already challenging period. Aile created a significant disturbance upon discovering that I would be taking my dad to dialysis twice a week. Initially, I tried to explain to her that my father did not have anyone else to rely on. His parents had passed away long ago, and while he has an older brother, that brother lives on the opposite side of the city and comes to see him very rarely. Since my mother's death, my father has become increasingly lonely, and I feel that I cannot just leave him alone during this difficult time. However, Aile refuses to see things this way. Lately, she has made my life quite challenging. Every Saturday, without fail, she comes up with some new plan. Whether it's hosting a party at our house, deep cleaning, going out with the kids, or even something as trivial as picking up groceries, she expects me to participate. I have tried to make it clear that Saturdays are when I take my dad for dialysis, so I cannot engage in any of these activities. Despite my explanations, she persists with her plans and later chastises me for being late or missing out on the events. I find myself in a rush to pick up my dad, take him to the dialysis center, and get him back home. Afterward, I have to endure her sarcasm and tantrums. This struggle does not only occur on Saturdays, it happens again on Wednesday evenings. I have assured my boss that I will catch up on my work late at night after returning from the dialysis session. Yet, Aile seems to have a way of complicating this as well. Most Wednesdays, she chooses to go out, whether to see her family, reconnect with friends, or attend some random event, while I am left to care for the children. This means that I am constantly juggling responsibilities, managing my work obligations, cooking for the kids, feeding the youngest, and attempting to catch up on tasks for my job. This all happens after a long and tiring day spent at work and at the dialysis center. I know this description may seem lengthy, but it illustrates how challenging my situation has become. My dad has even suggested that I allow him to go to the dialysis center with a nurse instead, recognizing that I am often in a hurry and always checking my watch. After I drop him off at home, I don't even take a moment to sit and talk. I rush back to face Aile's complaints and frustrations. When picking him up, I ask him to be ready and waiting outside before I arrive. Although my dad has the support of a full-time nurse and a caretaker, I still feel guilty for not spending more quality time with him. Normally, the 30-minute drive to the dialysis center was a time I cherished, where we would chat and reminisce about the good old days. However, with the increasing pressure from Aile, I find myself focusing solely on getting back home as quickly as possible. I often speed through traffic, taking shortcuts and overtaking cars just to cut down on travel time. This drive is precious time with my dad, and I don't want to lose that by having him go with the nurse. As a son, I feel it is my responsibility to be there for him. However, things have only gotten worse as the days go by. Aile is now doing everything in her power to discourage me from spending time with my father. Her argument is that it's pointless since my dad has removed me from his will and given his assets to charity. She claims there's no reason for me to waste my time and energy on him. This viewpoint confuses me. Should we only care for our parents based on what they can give us in return? What happens to those whose parents do not have wealth or resources? Should their children abandon them for these reasons? After enduring her complaints for many months, I confronted her. I told her that she wouldn't inherit anything from her own parents either, so why does she make such an effort to visit them often? This comment set her off. She angrily responded that her parents had always supported her in everything, unlike my father, who had disowned me for not joining his business. The tension escalated, and she demanded that I never compare her parents to mine again. This type of argument has unfortunately become a regular occurrence in our home, particularly on Wednesdays and Saturdays after I return from dialysis. The conflicts have become more intense and hostile over time. Aile no longer argues with me privately, she now yells and shouts at me in front of the children, adding to the strain in our household. This ongoing situation is taking a toll, and I am at a loss for how to navigate my responsibilities to my father while dealing with Aile's growing resentment and anger. I have experienced a troubling situation where I overheard my partner speaking negatively about my father in front of my children. Not only did she criticize him, but she also tried to turn my kids against both me and my dad. I could not just stand by and let this happen, so I stepped in to intervene. This action, however, led to yet another heated argument between us. It seems that fighting has become a regular occurrence in our lives. On days when we do not argue, it feels oddly empty, as though something is missing. The following day, she often returns with even more anger and hostility. I have reached a point where I feel almost defeated by her behavior. Instead of responding with anger or shouting back, I have chosen to simply ignore her. It is as if she does not exist for me anymore. I am struggling with the dilemma of not wanting to abandon my father just to keep the peace with her. Her discontent does not sway me, I am unfazed by the fact that he has removed me from his will. He made that decision as a result of my choice to refrain from joining his business. This step must have been incredibly painful for him, as that business was like a child to him. I can understand why he might feel justified in distancing himself from me, especially since I hurt him. There are moments when I reflect on my actions and feel as though I am facing the consequences of my past mistakes, particularly in regard to my father. As time goes on, I notice my dad is weakening. He struggles to walk and needs assistance to get in and out of the car. I used to rush him outside, but I no longer mind being late. Now, I take my time to support him and ensure he is comfortable. I walk slowly with him to the car, and once I drive him home, I make sure he is settled in his bed peacefully. He has also been experiencing shortness of breath, so I am very careful with our pace during our outings. I drive cautiously, ensuring not to speed, as I do not want to cause any additional stress to his heart. My focus has shifted from rushing home to ensuring my father is content. The tension between my partner and me has reached a breaking point. Just yesterday, she demanded that I make a choice between her and my dad. I attempted to explain that my father's limited time left should be a priority. Considering his health, it doesn't seem likely he has long to live. Her response was cold and calculating, insisting that I must choose wisely between someone who will be around forever or someone who is close to death. This statement struck me as incredibly inconsiderate, and I made it clear that I would choose my dad over her, who is selfish and cruel to a dying man. In a fit of anger, she packed her bags and stormed out. I did not stop her. Some space was necessary for both of us. With her absence, I have taken on the tasks of caring for the house, my children, my dad, and my work. Surprisingly, I feel a sense of relief. The atmosphere has shifted, and it feels easier to manage everything without her around. Just 2 days ago, she sent me divorce papers. While I expected this, the timing caught me off guard. After a brief moment of shock, I felt an overwhelming sense of happiness and relief. I didn't hesitate to sign the papers and return them to her. To my surprise, she didn't request custody of the children, which had been my greatest concern. It was clear she did not want them in her life anymore. When she called me, her voice was filled with anger as she questioned how I could sign the papers without discussing it with her first. In the midst of our conversation, her mother took the phone and demanded that I should have been more proactive in trying to save my marriage. I found this ironic. Why would I do that when she was the one requesting a divorce? The end of our marriage was a relief for me. I told her I was pleased to be free from her influence and reminded her that she was the one who chose to abandon her children, not me. She mentioned that I could keep all my assets and the kids as she did not want them, claiming she did not want the burden of children in her life. I accepted this arrangement without hesitation, feeling fortunate to have my children with me. Although it provides me relief, I worry about their well-being, especially the younger one who misses his mom. Managing everything alone while I'm at work has its challenges, but I am determined to navigate through it. Every day brings new responsibilities, yet I strive to provide a loving and stable environment for my kids. I made the decision to move into my dad's house with my children, and I can confidently say that it was a wonderful choice. I truly appreciate all the kind suggestions from everyone that led me to this decision. Living with my dad has turned out to be beneficial for all of us. My dad now has the joyful company of my children, and they have their grandpa to play with, which has created a warm and loving environment. My dad had a full-time caregiver who was available to look after my children during the day. This arrangement worked out perfectly because it allowed my children to be cared for under my dad's supervision. It felt like the best deal we could have made. There is a genuine happiness that fills my heart whenever I see my dad playing and laughing with my kids, watching them enjoy their time together as they bond. Initially, I didn't expect this situation to unfold in such a positive way. My ex-wife, who wanted to end our marriage, thought that I would struggle to manage all my responsibilities, taking care of the children, running the household at my dad's place, and balancing my work. However, despite her doubts, everything has come together beautifully. I feel a sense of triumph in knowing that the divorce ultimately turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Recently, I received the heartbreaking news that my dad passed away in his sleep last week. He went to bed feeling happy and content after spending a delightful day playing with my children, and unfortunately, he never woke up. The doctor mentioned that he died peacefully, and the caregiver and nursing staff confirmed that my dad had been genuinely happy after I moved in with him. It seems that my presence and the joy of having my children around extended his life just a little longer. It's incredibly sad to lose my only parent, but I find comfort in knowing that he was able to enjoy his final months surrounded by family. My children are also mourning the loss of their grandpa, but he instilled good values in them during their time together. They often say that grandpa taught them about accepting reality and moving forward, reflecting a wisdom that I hope they carry with them. Hearing them speak positively about him makes me proud, and gives me strength during this difficult period of grief. In the wake of my dad's passing, something unexpected happened. His lawyer contacted me, asking to meet and discuss my dad's will. Initially, I thought it wasn't necessary since my dad had mentioned that his wealth was placed in a trust for charity. I felt content with that, believing everything would proceed without complication. However, I asked if I needed to vacate my dad's house, thinking it might also belong to the charity trust. To my surprise, the lawyer laughed and told me to come to his office. When I arrived, I found that the trust members were already there, having been informed about the meeting. As the lawyer began reading the will, tears filled my eyes. I was deeply moved to learn that my dad had actually named me as the sole heir to his entire estate, including his business, house, and all of his wealth. Overcome with emotion, I wondered if this change had been made after I took on the responsibility of caring for him. The lawyer reassured me that I had always been the heir, and no changes had been made. This revelation hit me hard, as it made me realize that despite our differences, my dad never truly abandoned me. He may have threatened to disown me to push me to succeed, and it hurt to think of the pain I caused him throughout my life. The lawyer shared that my dad was proud of me for pursuing my passion, even if it meant stepping away from our family business. I learned that I now have the authority to decide how to move forward with the business and could take it back from the trust if I chose. This thought filled me with determination. I had always followed my own path, and now it was time for me to honor my dad's legacy by scaling his business to heights he always envisioned. After processing this news, I shared it with my children. I explained that Grandpa had left them a portion of his wealth, which they would receive once they turn 18. Together, we visited his grave, bringing flowers and spending time in quiet reflection. This moment felt profoundly emotional for me, as I grappled with both my loss and the legacy my dad left behind. In the weeks following my dad's passing, life took on a new pace. I began to take over his business and engage in community service work, finding renewed purpose. The first step I took was quitting my job to dedicate myself fully to this new chapter. I made a significant decision to leave my job and focus fully on managing the family business. This change came with many steps, starting with renting out my house. My children and I agreed to move into my parents' house, a place rich with my childhood memories. This house means a lot to us, especially to my children, as they feel a strong connection to their grandpa who used to live there. It felt right to stay in a space filled with love and history. After the news broke that I had inherited a substantial fortune from my father, my home quickly became a gathering place for various visitors. Long-lost relatives, old friends, and even neighbors came by to share in the news. Among all these visitors, the most unexpected was my ex-wife, along with her parents. They arrived at my doorstep visibly upset, expressing their sadness about not knowing my father had passed away. They claimed that had they known, they would have attended the funeral. Her parents spoke highly of my dad, reminiscing about the good times they shared. Ale, my ex-wife, hugged our children tightly and cried, telling them how much she missed them. When I asked her why, if she truly felt that way, she hadn't been around for the past several months. Her excuse was that she tried to visit our old house, but it was locked. I found that hard to believe. If she was truly worried about her children, wouldn't she have made an effort to reach out to ensure they were okay? She had no clear answer for that. Her parents then suggested that we should put our past behind us now that my father was gone. They argued that the children needed a mother, and it would be best if we reconciled. I couldn't help but laugh at their suggestion. They thought my children needed their mother, but it was she who left them in my care. My kids had adjusted to her absence, and I had no desire to bring her back into my life. Seeing her cry, her parents stepped aside, leaving us alone. She took my hands, pleading for us to give it another chance, saying she loved me and longed to be with the kids. I responded with laughter, stating the truth. She was more interested in my newly inherited wealth than in our past relationship. It was clear to me that Ale and her parents were only there to benefit from my father's hard-earned money. I had no regrets about expressing my thoughts, especially since they had once called my father greedy during our divorce. I assured her there was no way I would allow her to have any of my father's money. Ale seemed offended by my words about her parents, claiming she was only asking because she loved me. However, she then shifted her focus to wanting half of my inheritance, which she intended to claim as hers. I told her she could try whatever she wished, but I would fight back against any attempt to take even a penny from me. I was determined to protect what my father worked hard for and not let her benefit from his legacy. After our encounter, I consulted with my lawyer about her potential claims. He informed me that her chances of succeeding were low since the divorce settlement had already been finalized, and I had full custody of the children. He also warned me to be cautious about allowing her time with the kids, as she might seek to manipulate them into pursuing custody or demanding financial support later. I greatly appreciated his guidance and planned to keep a close eye on any meetings between Ale and our children. To help my kids cope with their loss, I have been spending more time with them. It is important to me that they do not turn to Ale for emotional support, especially during this sensitive time. I have taken on my father's company, which has granted me some flexibility in balancing my work and personal life. I am even planning a vacation for the kids to the Bahamas, a deserving getaway that they can enjoy. It may involve spending some of my father's wealth, but I would have done this even if I had earned the money myself. Before, I was too busy managing his care and my work obligations, but now I finally have the time. Since her last visit, Ale hasn't reached out to me. I suspect she is busy consulting with lawyers to figure out how to proceed with any legal actions against me, but I remain ready to protect myself and my children from any further complications.